Hey you guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria Evans and I'm a science-based intuitive eating coach, and I'm really excited because today we are going to be talking about how to recover from an eating disorder on your own. I'm going to be telling you about my eating disorder recovery journey, and I'm also going to give you 5 of my favorite tips for eating disorder recovery. So let's get into it. So I want to start off by just telling you a little bit about my eating disorder recovery journey. So I'm someone who struggled with bulimia on and off for about 10 years. And within that, I also struggled with anorexia, as well as binge eating, as well as orthorexia, as well as amenorrhea. And so if you don't know what orthorexia is, that is basically an obsession with healthy eating. If you don't know what amenorrhea is, that's basically when you lose your period, you lose your menstruation, and it can be for different reasons, but ultimately one of the more recent studies, one of the more recent ways they talk about it is called REDS, which is relative energy deficiency syndrome, meaning that your body, the intake of calories is not more than their output of calories. So you're in such a big deficit that basically the hormones in your body and your body's basically kind of shutting down and saying, hey, we don't have enough energy to basically have the proper ability, the right hormones flowing, all of that to have a menstruation cycle, to, eventually bring a child into the world kind of thing, right? And so I didn't have that because I was so energy deficient. So one of the things that I discovered in my eating disorder recovery journey is that an eating disorder is not actually an illness of the body. It has nothing to do with how your body looks. It's everything to do with the illness of the mind. You can also maybe relate to that because it maybe feels like no matter what you do to your body, no matter how much weight you've lost or where you've gained or whatever the objective, the goal is, it's never going to be enough, right? And that's because it has nothing to do with your body. It has to do with your mind. And for myself, an eating disorder really represented was I felt so much chaos in my inner world. I felt like I was broken. I felt like I wasn't enough as I was. I felt like I had to get to a certain body type and look a certain way in order to be lovable and worthy and good enough. And so for me, an eating disorder was all about control. I was trying to control the chaos in my inner world, that deep feeling of inadequacy, by controlling my outer world. And that meant by counting the calories, by obsessing about food, by knowing what I can and can't eat, right? All those food rules, having crazy workouts. And all of that was to try to give myself a sense of control when I felt completely out of control in my life. And so then what I would do, when I was struggling with bulimia, for example, is I would control throughout the day, make myself feel like I had some autonomy over what was going on in my life, right? And then eventually I would lose control, right? I would binge, and it would be chaotic and wild, and I would be eating as much as I could, as quickly as I could. And then what I would do is I was purge, right? I would purge, throw all of the food up, and then I would flush it away down the toilet. I would flush the chaos away. So I went from controlled and perfect, right? Then I had this I'm not controlled, I'm not perfect episode. But because that wasn't okay, I wasn't allowed to not be perfect. I wasn't allowed to have this out of control feeling. All of that chaos, all of that fury, all of that, everything that I deemed unacceptable would be quite literally flushed away. Right? And then I could just wipe my mouth, right? Drink some water. My eyes would eventually go back to not being red after a purge, and I would pretend it was fine, right? I would pretend that everything that was wrong with me flushed down the toilet at the same time, and that couldn't have been further from the truth. So if you're someone who's struggling with an eating disorder, if you're someone who feels like the way that they control food, the rules that they have gives them some kind of control in the world, I beg you to think about the fact that you will never be free by implementing control. You will never feel free in your life. You'll never be able to do the things you're meant to do if all you're doing is worrying about the food you're eating and the body that you're in. And it is so sad to me, and I work with so many incredible clients, but who miss out on so much of their life, and my life included, because I was so worried about what I looked like. I was so worried that I wasn't enough as I was, and so I was going to do all the things that we're told to do to be happy. Lose weight, get the career, get the car, whatever that external thing is. But there's never going to be enough external things to fill that internal void. And this brings me to my second point, something that is really important that I want you to think about, consider, contemplate, and that is this quote by Albert Einstein, which I really love, and that is that the significant problems we have cannot be solved at the same level of thinking with which we created them. Take a second to really think that through. I'm going to read it again. The significant problems we have cannot be solved at the same level of thinking with which we created them. If your problem is that you're restricting with food, if your problem is that you are bulimic, if your problem is that you struggle with exercise addiction, if your problem is that you're orthorexic, right? Whatever that problem is in your life, you cannot solve that problem with the same level of thinking at the same time that you've created it. Meaning, if I started using food as a way to control, to try to make myself feel like I was adequate and worthy, I'm not going to solve that problem of feeling inadequate and worthy with food. I'm not going to solve it by thinking about it the same way. And that's what I love about coaching and the work I do. We have to take that step back and realize that it's not food that is the problem. It's not our body that is the problem. It's the symptom. Right? Those things are the symptom of the underlying problem. They're the coping mechanism that we have the access to give us a sense of control in our own life when we feel completely out of control. And so when you look at this from more of a survival kind of brain-based standpoint, which is how I coach, it's understanding that your body's actually so incredibly smart. So if you are struggling with eating disorder, it was your body's best attempt at giving you a sense of control, giving you a sense of safety, when otherwise it felt very unsafe. It's giving your body a feeling of safety when the world around you did not feel safe to be in. So I want you to release any shame or any judgment that you are struggling with the eating disorder, because at the end of the day, you're doing the best you can. And you're here. You're watching this video, you're moving towards those steps of recovery, and you're doing everything in your power to get to that place. And you might have that small voice in your head that says, I know, but I still have that kind of push-pull feeling. And that's okay, right? Because I'm going to talk about my 5 different tips. That contemplation, that uncertainty is normal because it's unfamiliar stepping into recovery. It's unfamiliar letting go of these controlling tendencies. And that's how your brain is supposed to work, right? Our brain fears what is unfamiliar. Our brain fears what it feels it can't control. And so if all of a sudden you're stepping into these new behaviors in recovery where all of a sudden you're relinquishing this control that you've used to make yourself feel safe, and you're stepping into unfamiliar behaviors and digging deeper into the parts of yourself that are unhealed, right? The parts that you are trying to use food and control of your body to escape, it's going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. That means you're doing the work, you're doing it right. This whole idea, is that the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know when it comes to your brain. Your brain wants to stay with what is familiar, even if it's not what is necessarily serving you best, right? It'll keep you stuck in behaviors that we think is self-sabotage, but is really self-protection from some kind of an unmet need. And so through my work with clients, you understand what is that unmet need? What is that thing I'm trying to escape from, that my body is trying to protect me from, that I'm trying to use the control of food and body to give myself an illusion of control in my life? With that said, let's dig into the 5 tips for eating disorder recovery. The first one, and this was game changing for me in my own eating disorder recovery journey. Seriously, this is really how I recovered. I mean, I'm going to probably say that about all 5 of my tips, so stay tuned. But the first thing is educate, right? You are not broken. What you were doing is a coping mechanism because your body is smart, right? So for myself, the first thing I had to do was dive deep into the research and realize this was not about me being a failure. It was about me not understanding myself, right? So what I want you to do, whatever it is that you're currently struggling with, whatever that eating disorder is or mental health issue that it is, I want you to do research. And I'm not saying research on some random, person who isn't in any way, really giving you useful advice. Now, for this research, what I really suggest you do is dive into it, right? Education is empowering. This for me was such a game changer when I understood why I was doing different things. And that's ultimately how I coach now, is through that brain-based approach. Right? So what are the books that you can order off Amazon on the topic, or for your Kindle or on Audible, right? Some audiobooks. What are the podcasts related to this topic that you can listen to? Who are the people on social media who are, in recovery and truly in recovery, right? Truly in recovery and talking about it in an open, candid way. And I say that because there's a lot of people on accounts like TikTok who say they're in eating disorder recovery, but they're very much still sick, they're very much still struggling, and they're promoting disordered behaviors. So be very cognizant of who you're following. So there's so many amazing therapists and psychologists and some coaches, and there's so many incredible people that you can follow who are giving very empowering, correct information. So just be mindful of whose content you're consuming and that it's not actually doing the opposite of helping you, right? It's actually giving you more disordered content, more disordered ideas. So educate, right? Go on to NEDA, which is the National Eating Disorder Association. Look on Amazon. What are the different books on the topic? What are different podcasts that are highly rated on the topic? Who are the people on social media you can follow who are truly moving the needle forward in this space, right? So that would be maybe a psychologist or, a therapist or, a coach or like people kind of in that realm, not just necessarily people just sharing their own stories, which yes, can be helpful, but at the same time, sometimes it can be a little bit disordered because they're still struggling in recovery. The second tip I can give you is to release the shame, right? Release the shame. There is often this feeling, and for myself, I had this feeling that it was my burden to bear, that I had to fix this, that I was the one who got myself into these eating disorder struggles, and I had so much shame and so much embarrassment around it. I didn't want people to know. I didn't want anyone to see what I was doing. I wanted to maintain this illusion that I was perfect and everything was wonderful, and I didn't want anyone to kind of see what was going on behind that mask. And that is really what kept me stuck for so long, is that I was so embarrassed and I had so much shame that I was struggling as deeply as I was when on the outside my life looked perfect, right? I had all the things I was supposed to have, and yet I'd never been so unhappy. That's because I was living so inauthentically. I was so wrapped up in who I thought I should be versus who I was, and that disconnect, that space between the two was crushing. It was exhausting. And what really fueled that, so kind of part 2 of the second tip here, is my self-talk. I was so mean to myself, and I had this idea that I had to be mean to myself to motivate myself to be better, right? If I accept myself as I am, then that means that I'm never going to be any better. I'm just going to stay stuck as this version of me. That's actually the opposite of what is true. So when you're speaking to yourself negatively, what's actually happening is you're creating shame. Now, shame actually triggers the same part of your brain as if you were in actual physical pain. Now, your brain does not like actual physical pain because it sees it as a potential threat, possibly death. Your brain avoids that at all costs, which means when you are telling yourself, what the fuck is wrong with me? I can't believe I did that. I'm so stupid. I always do this. I'm a fucking blah, 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 whatever that dialogue is, right? You're creating shame, which creates pain. What do we do when we have pain? We avoid that pain. What does pain look like, right? For us, what does that avoidance of pain look like, rather? It's self-soothing behaviors, which we think is self-sabotage, right? It's self-protection. Self-soothing, self-protection. Those is what is happening when we think it's actually self-sabotage, but it's not that. And so the alternative of that is positive self-talk. Now what you're thinking, like, fucking hell, Victoria, I don't want to tell myself I'm wonderful and amazing and all the things because I don't believe that. And that's totally fair. You know what? For a long time, I didn't believe it too. And I was like, people who are just like, just love yourself. I'm like, I'm going to punch you in the fucking face, right? And so when it comes to self-talk, there's this really cool concept, a podcast called Unfuck Your Brain by Kara Lowenthal. She's an amazing person, so go and check out that podcast if you don't already know it. Basically, she talks a lot about the thought ladder, which is basically this idea that if you're someone who's super negative in your thoughts, I fucked up again, what is wrong with me, blah, 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 right? If you think about like a number line or a ladder, I guess, at the top, if that positive, it can feel really far away. Going from I hate myself to I love myself just seems astronomical and also not believable, which means you're never really going to get there. You maybe say it a couple times, that voice in your head is like, that's a lie, and then you just kind of come all the way back. Versus by working towards not necessarily positivity, but neutrality, right? And so instead of going super negative, we just want to get to that neutral. So if it's like a number line, you're thinking like negative and you're thinking positive, right? You want to get to neutral. So with this self-talk, it's like, you know what? This is really fucking hard, but I'm trying my best and I'm doing the research and each day I'm putting in that work, that time, right? It doesn't have to be this big grand statement. And this can work with body image stuff. This can work with anything in your life. But know that negative self-talk is not moving you in the direction you want to go. It's moving you in the opposite direction. It's moving you towards the self-soothing behaviors, which we often consider self-sabotage, right? So for example, if I've binged and then purged and the thought is, what the fuck is wrong with me? I can't believe I did that again. Tomorrow I'm going to get back on track. I'm going to be good. I'm going to be perfect, blah, blah, blah. That shaming behavior and also setting the bar if I have to be perfect tomorrow and get back on track, which sets this like super high, can't be anything but that. Otherwise, I kind of slip back into a binge because I was unable to meet those expectations of myself, right? That sets me up for the next binge. This idea of I have to be perfect, the negative self-talk, the shame sets me up for that next binge and purge. Versus I binged and I purge and asking myself, okay, that's not what I wanted, right? What happened there? Right? Getting curious, getting compassionate. That's what I really do with clients, is hold that space and help them understand kind of what was going on, creating that path, creating that protocol. So moving forward, we can maybe choose differently. But that really hinges on the fact that we're not shaming ourselves, right? So getting curious, getting compassionate. What was going on there? Did I not eat enough that day? And when I got home at the end of the day, I started eating super quickly because my energy levels were super low because I didn't have enough calories in my body. And then I got to a certain point, I was eating so much that I felt really uncomfortably full that I said, fuck it. I've already, fucked up my eating for the day, so I might as well go all out. I'm going to eat everything in the kitchen, and then tomorrow I'm going to get back on track and be perfect, right? Like, how often have I said that to myself years and years ago, and how many times with my clients, and maybe for yourself as well. If you've ever said that before, like, drop in the comments below so we all know we're not alone in that, right? But something to remember is that negative self-talk creates negative actions, and positive self-talk creates positive actions. And with that, right, nothing changes if nothing changes, meaning you can't shame your way to caring for yourself because we don't take care of what we don't respect, what we don't like, what we don't love. And so shame and that negative self-talk is not moving you forward, it's moving you backwards. Working towards more of a neutrality, leaning into some self-compassion and getting curious at what happened, that's going to be the way that you move forward. So next time you're about to start berating yourself and beating yourself up, I want you to picture yourself standing at a fork in the road and being like, this way is the negative self-talk that's going to get me exactly where I've always been. And the positive self-talk, which is unfamiliar, right? That neutral to positive self-talk, which is unfamiliar, but it's a road that's actually going to move me forward. It's going to create positive actions, right? So even that saying something like, today was really tough, but I did the best I could and I'm proud of myself for trying. Something as simple as that actually gives you hits of dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter for the anticipation of reward. It's a renewable energy source. It's going to give you that energy, that power, that motivation to keep moving forward on that path. Versus the shaming, hating, blaming yourself, the negative self-talk that releases things like cortisol, which is a stress hormone that is going to burn you out and deplete you, and you're going to end up exactly where you've always been, which is not where you want to go, right? So that was number 2. Number 3. Recovery is not linear. I had this idea that once I decided to recover, it was just going to be this like beautiful upward slope. And I was just going to be like this new version. I was like, I'm so deep into the self-care. I love I'm going to just rock it off there. I know all the stuff. I know all the science and all the education, thinking it was going to be this like easy little Escalade ride to the top. It's not, right? And that's okay. Linear is not a normal path of recovery. It's the ups and the downs. But here's the thing about that. That's part of it, because the downs is when you learn. If everything was just a perfect up, you wouldn't have those moments where you're like, well, that didn't work. Oh, I did purge tonight. Oh, I did restrict all day. What happened there? Right? Those moments when we feel like we're taking that step backwards are not so much a step back as a step almost to like step above. And be like, have a bird's eye view of what is going on, being like, I noticed this happened here. I didn't eat, or had this conversation with this person, or this person said something about my body, or blah, 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 right? Instead of a step back, it's kind of like a step up to be like, what happened here, right? Have that context, have that bird's eye view, so that next time when we're in a similar situation, we have that understanding, we have that awareness, we have that perspective. But if we are always thinking that the step back means that we have to go back to zero, we're never going to learn and grow, right? If I purge once after I've gone several days purge free and I think, what's the point? Then I end up back at zero. But if I realize like, I did purge. What was going on there? What happened? Leaning into that positive self-talk, leading into that compassion, educating myself, right? All these past little tips I've been giving you. And then from there, now we can continue moving forward step by step, knowing there will be more back steps or up steps, as it were, right? But that doesn't mean that you've failed. It just means that you're learning, if you choose to see it that way. And in my work, so much what we do is removing that perfectionist tendency where it has to be perfect or we've failed. And because recovery is not going to be perfect, right? It's going to be ups and downs, and just life is going to have ups and downs. You have to work through that perfectionist mentality in order to understand those little mini steps forwards, and what feels like those steps back are also just where we are learning and deeper understanding ourselves. And so it's not that you failed, it's not that you're broken, it's not that you've done something incredibly wrong. You just have an opportunity to get curious and compassionate to understand what happened there, so that next time you have more awareness and maybe choose differently. Not every time you will, you might end up in the same situation, might have the same thing happen again. That's okay. Just another opportunity to learn what the heck went on there. What happened? Why did this happen? Again, not from a shame place, but from a curiosity place. Now, an example of this is I have a toolkit for bulimia, for example, and one of the tools I give is called days winning. And so what I used to think in recovery was that if I would be like, I've gone 10 days without purging, right? And I'd be so proud of myself. Or maybe you struggle with anorexia. I've gone 10 days without restricting, eating all my meals, right? And then we have one day, maybe that next day, day 11, where we do purge, or we did restrict and miss a couple of meals. And then we think in our brain, we have to go back to 0 days of since we've restricted, 0 days since we've purged, 0 days since we've excessively exercised, whatever that thing is. And it feels like all our progress has been erased. We feel like we fucked up. It's this depleting, heavy feeling. And again, it's very perfectionist, right? It's all or nothing. And so this tool that I'm very proud of, what you want to do is, instead of keeping track of it's been 21 days in a row since I've done whatever that behavior is, I want you to think about it as a total. Meaning, if I have gone 10 days purge free, and on day 11 I purge, my days winning is 10, right? I don't need to go back to 0. I don't need to minus anything. It's me, days winning is 10. Now I lay this out in my toolkit. I'll drop it into the comments below and in the description so you can check out, so have a bit more of a context and idea of what I'm talking about, because I have a visual. But basically, right, that toolkit is, and this days winning is basically reminding you that you don't go back to 0 if you miss a day, right? If something happens, if you are human and your recovery isn't linear. And so then maybe on day 11, you do purge, and that's okay, right? It's part of the recovery journey, getting compassionate, curious, we know what went on there. Then day 12, or rather the next day, right, is maybe you don't purge again, or you don't restrict, or you don't excessive exercise. So now your days go to days, number of days winning is 11. Hopefully I'm explaining this clearly. I'm realizing I'm kind of jumbling this up. But basically now your new number is 11. And then maybe the next day you don't have any of those behaviors, so now it's 12 days winning. But then maybe the next day you do, right? Doesn't mean the number changes. So then the following day, if you don't have those behaviors, then you add that up. So now it's 13. So I hope you can see what I'm saying here, understanding what I mean. And this tool goes into some different variations. There's kind of a couple more steps to it. So if you're curious to learn what that is, go and again check out in the comments below, so you can grab your copy. But I give lots of super useful tools, super helpful tools there, things that really helped me on my recovery after struggling with bulimia for over 10 years. So it could definitely help you as well. All right, number 4. And that is that it is not about willpower, right? This is not something that is a flaw with you. This is not that you have not built up your willpower strong enough to overcome these urges and these tendencies and all of that, right? For example, binge eating after restriction is the correct response. I used to think that I could just get rid of the binging portion, but keep the restriction, and everything would be great. I wouldn't struggle with bulimia because I wouldn't be binging. And I was like, I just need to have more willpower and get more scheduled with how I'm eating and be harder on myself. And it's like, no, right? Binge eating was the exact right response when I was restricting, right? You think about it like plus and minus. It's like if you're in minus, you need the plus because your body wants to be in balance. It doesn't work that way when you're just trying to get, keep going more and more negative and then wondering why you keep doing these kind of correcting behaviors. And so it's not about willpower. Same thing if you're struggling with anorexia, right? It's not about the fact you don't have enough willpower. It's that your body feels unsafe to be eating, right? It all comes back to my coaching. I really talk about the nervous system, but your body, it feels like it's unsafe to consume that food. And with restriction, similar. It feels like it's unsafe to, consume that food when you're in that restriction portion. And then, different with bulimia and binging though, is that you kind of pendulum swing to the other side and then binge to kind of course correct. With anorexia, it's a little bit different in terms of how you kind of think about it and perceive it, how your brain kind of operates within the context of it. But basically, I just want you to understand that eating disorder is not about willpower. It has nothing to do with that. So just remove that from your brain and move forward. Because at the end of the day, telling yourself that you just need to have more willpower is, again, just creating more shame, making you feel like you're, broken, not enough. And that's ultimately part of the reason why you struggled with these behaviors in the first place. So you're just kind of compounding on it as opposed to taking positive action steps forward. Number 5. So this is my last one. Whew, my air conditioning is on, but I'm sweating. So number 5 is you need to build trust with yourself, right? How many times did we tell ourselves today was going to be the last day, or tonight's the last night that I'm going to do this behavior, and tomorrow I'm going to be better, I'm going to be good, or today I'm not going to binge on XYZ, and then we did, or today I'm going to eat all my meals, and then you didn't, or today I'm not going to force myself to do X calories at the gym, and then you did, like whatever that thing is. Each time you do that, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? It's like every time you do it, a little bit of your trust gets knocked away until you end up in these moments. Like I remember when I was struggling with bulimia, I was afraid of myself. I felt like a completely different person when I was struggling. I literally was like, I felt so powerless to who I was, because I remember one night actually when I was struggling with binge eating and bulimia, I was watching TV. I was at home. I was back from Montreal and I was watching TV on the couch with my mom. And I said to her in the morning, I said, Mom, tonight when you go to bed, I'm going to binge and I'm probably going to purge. I'm going to tell you I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you that I'm good. I'm going to tell you that I'm fine and that I'm going to be going to bed in a few minutes. I'm going to be lying to you. I'm going to become this different version of myself. And she's going to go through all the kitchen cabinets, find all the things, try to make it look like no one's eating it, try to put the wrappers in a very strategic, special way so maybe you don't notice. But I basically said to her, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to say. And I want you to force me to go to bed. I want you to force me to not be left down here alone, to come upstairs and go to bed. Now that night, my mom and I were sitting down watching TV and she goes, okay. She was dating her now husband at the time. She's like, I'm going to go FaceTime Rob. And I was like, okay. And she's like, are you okay down here? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I'll be up in a few minutes. She's like, okay. Did I not eat that entire kitchen? Right. Did I not eat all of there wasn't too much there, but one of the things was popcorn. We had an air fryer and I remember taking it into the garage and popping popcorn and smothering it in butter so that I could pop it in the garage so she wouldn't hear it. And then I was eating it like secretly. She couldn't smell it, she couldn't eat it, like she couldn't hear me eating it and all that. And going to bed later and just being like, fuck, man, like again, I did this. I even tried to create, an environment where I would be held accountable and I still did it. And so that's just one example of like thousands I have where I was just losing that trust in myself, and with my clients as well. And I work with them in my one-on-one coaching programs, having that accountability, but also learning how to build that trust back with yourself, how to learn how to be with yourself again instead of afraid of yourself and feeling like you're a different person. Because that's exhausting. Like, how are we supposed to live our life and be the person we're meant to be and have these big goals and dreams if we're afraid of who we are? And we can't spend any time alone with them. Otherwise, we're eating or we're purging or we're exercising or whatever the numbing thing is, right? Distraction, avoidance, we're afraid of ourselves. And it's very difficult and actually impossible to show up as our highest self and do what we need to do in this life if we're not able to be with ourselves, right? And so when it comes to building trust, is really something, again, I said, I work on with clients. So I have toolkits, I have courses, I have my one-on-one coaching programs. I have lots of different, resources and ways that can help people depending on their income level, depending on how much support they need. But basically, one of the tools I give people is what I call the Trust and Wins document. Now, this is something I created, again, years and years and years ago, one of my favorite tools. And basically, what we want to be doing is documenting all the times that we had these small little wins. Your perfectionist brain is going to absolutely fucking hate this because it's only going to document like the big wins. And that's why we're doing this. It's the little wins. Because trust is not built in the big moments. It's built in the little moments that you show up for yourself consistently over time. And up until now, you've only looked for the times that you fucked up, right? So you've literally trained your brain, your reticular activating system, to only look for the times, the moments, the experiences, whatever, that you failed yourself, that you didn't trust yourself. And now, because of how your brain works, your reticular axis activating system, which is a part of your brain which decides what is important and relevant information. It's basically going to scan the environment only to see things that what you perceive as failures, because you've told your brain this is important to look for them. If we don't know how we failed, then we're never going to improve, and negative self-talk and blah, 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 right? Versus we want to prime our brain to look for the times that we showed up for ourselves, the moments that we had trust, because this work, recovery, healing, what I coach, intuitive eating as well as recovery, right? It's all about learning to trust yourself again, coming home to yourself and being able to be with yourself so that we stop worrying about food in our body. We can actually start doing what's important, what fills us up, what makes us happy, I used to spend all my time worrying about food in my body, and then I lived in Portugal for a few years. I lived in Bali for a few years. Now I live in Thailand. I have a fucking amazing life, but none of that was even accessible to me. I couldn't even have thought about it because I was spending so much time worrying about food in my body. So with this Trust and Wins document, basically going to your phone, going to your notes app, titling it Trust and Wins, and every time you have a little win, it doesn't have to be a big win, that's the point, right? It's a small win. Even watching this video, that would be a win. Maybe you wanted to restrict the morning after a binge, but you chose to have a little bit of breakfast instead. Or maybe you wanted to restrict because you're struggling with the anorexia and you were really struggling to eat a meal, and you gave yourself a lot of self-compassion and you regulate that nervous system. You did some breathing exercises and all those kind of different things, right, to help yourself feel a little bit more calm and embodied, and then we're able to take some bites at dinner and eat that meal. That's more of a big example maybe, but right, hopefully you're getting the kind of idea of documenting all those little wins. So those are my 5 different tips for you. So educate, release the shame, and change the self-talk. Recovery is not linear, right? So think about that day's winning tool. It's not about willpower. And the last thing is you have to build that trust yourself. Now, before you go, with that said, I do offer coaching. So if some things I'm saying really resonate with you, my science-based approach, the fact that I love using tools, right? So I use my EAT framework, EAT, I thought that was kind of clever. Education, accountability, and tools. So if you like that style, if you like that approach, I really urge you to reach out. You can check out my website, www.victoriaevansoficial.com/programs. I have all the different ways you can work with me there. I also invite you to follow me on social media. You can send me a DM. That is at Victoria Evans Official on Instagram, and on TikTok, it's Intuitive Eating with Vic, and Vic is spelled V-I-C. So that's the other I have for you today. I put that as well below in the show notes, but I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. Go put that in your Trust and Wins right now on your phone that you watch this, and just know you're not alone in this journey. You're not alone in recovery. It can feel like it's never going to get better. It can feel overwhelming and scary, but just know I'm here for you. You're loved. You are so supported, and you're going to get through this, right? Talk soon.